Trump knows the danger behind reviving German militarism. He knows. How do I know this? Because he said it.
Germany has now agreed to rebuild their military. And they've decided that they're going to go all out and they're going to now rebuild their military. Be careful what you wish for.
Why is that?
Well, take a look over the last two world wars. Take a look over the last two world wars with Germany.
J.D. Vance went to the Munich Security Conference and he met with Alice Weidel, one of the leaders of the AfD. And Alice Weidel refused to celebrate the defeat of the Nazis.
Also hier die Niederlage des eigenen Landes zu befeiern mit einer ehemaligen Besatzungsmacht, das ist etwas, wo ich für mich persönlich entschieden habe, auch mit der Fluchtgeschichte meines Vaters, daran nicht teilzunehmen.
Now, what kind of a person refuses to celebrate the victory over the Nazis? It's very simple. Nazis. And you have people saying that we should support the AfD in the name of freedom. But the AfD doesn't believe in freedom. They want to enforce nationalism in German society.
Leaders of our European allies should take primary responsibility for defense of the continent.
You are going to revive German power because the Germans are going to say, okay, America, you want us to be the defenders of Europe? We have to bring back our military. How are we going to encourage young German men to join the military? We have to bring back nationalism. Are there Zionists who do act like Nazis? Absolutely yes.
כל הגויים שאתה רואה שיש בעולם המיליארדים האלה, הם הכל רק בשביל שהיהודים יהיה להם איזה תועלת.
They have an ideology that is based on superiority. They believe that because they are Jewish, that they are superior. The people who want you to forget about past atrocities are the very people who want to repeat those atrocities. All right, everyone. So today I'm going to be doing a video response to a comment that disagrees with me. And this commenter disagrees with a video that I recently uploaded in which I warn people about the revival of Nazism and the revival of German militarism. And in this video, I talk about how America has been contributing to this revival. Now, what do I mean by that? How can America be doing this, right? Or how do I know that America is doing this? It's right before our eyes, everyone. Right before our eyes. And before I read the comment that disagrees with me, let me first explain to you guys about the video to which this man is disagreeing. That way you will understand what this commenter disagrees with. In this video, I talk about J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance went to the Munich Security Conference and he demonstrated his support for the AfD. Now, the AfD stands for the Alternative for Deutschland Party, and they are the most popular nationalist party in all of Germany. And they are also the biggest militarist party in the German parliament, in the German Bundestag. They want to revive German militarism. Now, how much suffering did the world go through because of German militarism? What did the world go through because of German militarism? World War I, World War II. And this party in Germany wants to bring German militarism back from the dead. Now, how in the hell is that a good idea? How in the hell could you think that that is a good idea? And how in the hell can intelligent people think that this is a helpful and beneficial idea for the world? Apparently, J.D. Vance thinks that this is a good idea. Now you're going to say, well, how do you know that J.D. Vance is contributing to the revival of German militarism? Because he went to Munich and he met with Alice Weidel, one of the leaders of the AfD. And Alice Weidel refused to celebrate the defeat of the Nazis. She refused to celebrate the victory over the Nazis in World War II. And she said, I refuse to celebrate the defeat of my country, Deutschland.
Also hier die Niederlage des eigenen Landes zu befeiern mit einer ehemaligen Besatzungsmacht. Das ist etwas, wo ich für mich persönlich entschieden habe, auch mit der Fluchtgeschichte meines Vaters daran nicht teilzunehmen.
Sie sagten in der Neuen Zürcher Zeitung am Sonntag, am 12. Januar, da ging es zu der Einladung in die russische Botschaft zum Jahrestag des Siegs über Nazi-Deutschland, die Sie dort ausschlugen. Und Sie sagten, die Niederlage meiner Heimat mit einer ehemaligen Besatzungsmacht zu feiern, passe zum Schuldkult der Deutschen. Da steht es, passt ganz zum Schuldkult der Deutschen. Warum benutzen Sie dieses Wort? Was heißt das für Sie, Schuldkult?
Das stimmt, das habe ich gesagt im Sommerinterview, dass ich nicht in die russische Botschaft gehe, um den 8. Mai hier zu feiern. Warum auch? Das mache ich nicht. Das würde ich auch nicht. Ja, warum sollte ich das machen? Da wurden so viel auch nicht aufgearbeitete Verbrechen an der deutschen Bevölkerung vergangen. Ich glaube nicht, dass an der Zivilbevölkerung. Und ich finde, da sollten wir auch mal Gedenktage einführen. Das werde ich nicht feiern, das werde ich auch in Zukunft nicht feiern. Und davon mal ganz abgesehen, worüber reden wir eigentlich? Die ganzen Probleme sind präsent. Die ganzen Leute, also die Menschen in diesem Land wollen, dass wir die Probleme lösen. Also worüber wollen wir jetzt eigentlich reden?
Wir reden nachher noch über die gegenwärtigen Probleme. Jetzt interessiert mich.
Ja, hoffentlich.
Now, what kind of a person refuses to celebrate the victory over the Nazis? It's very simple. Nazis. One of the major leaders of the AfD is Björn Höcke. Björn Höcke used to write for Nazi publications. Björn Höcke used to write articles praising the Third Reich. And now he is one of the major leaders of the AfD. Elon Musk says that the only hope for Germany is the AfD.
As I've said publicly, I think only AfD can save Germany. And I just want to be very clear about that. Only AfD can save Germany. End of story.
And J.D. Vance goes to Germany. He has a meeting with Alice Weidel and he demonstrates his support for the AfD. And not only this, but he expressed his disapproval of how German mainstream parties have been refusing to collaborate with the AfD, because the rule that has been agreed upon between German mainstream parties since the end of the Second World War is that you do not collaborate with the far right. Why is that? Well, it's quite obvious why, because of what happened in World War II and what happened with the Third Reich and how the Third Reich murdered so many countless millions of people. J.D. Vance goes to the Munich Security Conference and he tells the Germans to throw this rule out the window. He says, no, you guys need to be inclusive to the AfD. You guys need to stop firewalling the AfD.
And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't.
The AfD wants to revive German militarism. The AfD wants to create an ultra-nationalist culture in Germany, and the AfD wants to enforce it. This was made very, very clear by Björn Höcke. Björn Höcke said that he wants to establish an ultra-nationalist culture in Germany and he wants to enforce it. And you have people saying that we should support the AfD in the name of freedom, but the AfD doesn't believe in freedom. They want to enforce nationalism in German society. They want to revive German militarism. They want to bring back German militarism from the dead. And they want to merge German militarism with German civilian life. Now, how much suffering did the world go through because of German militarism? World War I, World War II. And you have Elon Musk saying that the only hope for Germany is the AfD. The only hope for Germany is a repackaged Nazi party. And Elon Musk did a speech for the AfD, and he said in this speech that Germany needs to have self-determination.
I think you want more self-determination for Germany and for the countries in Europe, and less from Brussels. That's my opinion. I think there's too much bureaucracy from Brussels, too much control from sort of global elite, and when I've given talks at these sort of global government conferences, what I've said is there should be less global government. There should be more determination by individual countries.
which means that Germany needs to be free from American power, because ever since the end of the Second World War, Germany has been an occupied country. It is under a military occupation by the United States. And imagine if Germany gets full freedom. Imagine if Germany gets full independence from American power and is completely unleashed. German militarism will be revived. German nationalism will be revived, and you will see a revival of this very destructive combination, this combination of ultra-German nationalism and German militarism. And you have Pete Hegseth speaking at a NATO conference, stating that the Europeans need to be the defenders of Europe.
Leaders of our European allies should take primary responsibility for defense of the continent, which means security ownership by all allies, guided by a clear understanding of strategic realities, and it's an imperative given the strategic realities that we face. And that begins with increasing defense spending. 2% is a start, as President Trump has said, but it's not enough. Nor is 3%, nor is 4%, more like 5%. Real investment, real urgency. We can talk all we want about values. Values are important. But you can't shoot values. You can't shoot flags, and you can't shoot strong speeches. There is no replacement for hard power.
Well, what are you going to do if you enact such an idea, if you bring such a policy into fruition? You are going to revive German power, because the Germans are going to say, okay, America, you want us to be the defenders of Europe? We have to bring back our military. And if we're going to bring back militarism, we're going to need high recruitment rates. Now, how are we going to incentivize young Germans to join the military? How are we going to encourage young German men to join the military? We have to bring back nationalism. And so you have this AfD party at the forefront of this agenda of reviving nationalism and militarism. And they are saying that we got to bring the German military back. And who is leading the party? People like Bjorn Höcke, who is a Nazi. And you have the US government through people like Musk and Vance supporting the AfD. So this is why I said in my video that the United States is contributing to the revival of Nazism and the revival of militarism. This is what I said in my video. This comment comes from a guy who calls himself Asian Man 8752. That is a very strange name. Asian Man writes, Zionists are Nazis. I don't understand why you are so against self-determination for countries. You want Palestine to be free, but want Europe to continue living in the guilt of the past. I never see you asking the Russians to live in the guilt of their Soviet past. The more you suppress the past and call it vile, the more people will build up admiration for it. So I'm going to respond to this comment piece by piece. So at the beginning of your comment, you say that Zionists are Nazis. When someone says that Zionists are Nazis, what they're trying to say is that Zionists act like Nazis. Because if you say that Zionists are Nazis, then some Zionist is going to come out and say, what are you talking about? Zionism is about supporting a Jewish state. How can a Zionist be a Nazi? That's a bunch of nonsense, etc., etc. Now, do all Zionists act like Nazis? Certainly not, right? No, not all Zionists act like Nazis. You have Zionists who are against what's been happening to the Palestinians. You have Zionists who speak out against what happened in Gaza. You have Zionists who talk about Israeli war crimes. Not all Zionists act like Nazis. Now, are there Zionists who do act like Nazis? Absolutely yes. Emphatically yes. Are there Zionists who subscribe to an ideology that can be paralleled to Nazism? Absolutely yes. And I want to give you guys some examples of this, because this is a dark reality that light must be shed upon. This is a dark reality that more and more people need to know about, especially in the United States, where you have these evangelical Christians who praise Israel and they think that Israel can do no wrong, and they believe in this piece of propaganda. They believe in this narrative that says that the Israeli army is the most moral army on earth and all this stuff. No, they are Israeli war crimes. And these Israeli war crimes are institutional. And I want to give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. So recently, an Israeli publication put out an article about a very atrocious war crime. The name of this Israeli publication, by the way, is called The Hottest Place in Hell. I don't know how to say that in Hebrew, but in English, it translates into the hottest place in hell. And in this article, it talks about this war crime that is absolutely atrocious. I was very upset when I read this article. What happened was you had these IDF soldiers who are part of this Israeli military brigade called the Nahal Brigade. And members of the Nahal Brigade went into this house where they found this 80-year-old man with his wife. The guy can't walk without a cane. The guy is disabled. He's disabled. He cannot walk without a cane. And these Israeli soldiers said, well, why didn't you go to Khan Yunis? Because a lot of Gazans fled to Khan Yunis. And this old man said, well, I'm elderly. I can't walk without a cane. I'm disabled. And I couldn't walk to Khan Yunis. So these Israeli soldiers said, well, we're going to make you into a bomb detector. And so they took this detonation wire and they wrapped it around this elderly man's neck. And they forced this guy for hours to search through all these houses looking for bombs. And on the other end of the wire, these Israeli soldiers were holding the wire, and they told this old man, if you try to run, we're going to pull the wire, and the wire is so sharp, it's going to decapitate you. It's going to slice your head right off. And they were dragging this old man around like a dog. It's so dehumanizing. It is utterly dehumanizing what these guys did. It's atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. And for 8 hours, they forced this guy to search for bombs in these houses in this part of Gaza. I think this happened in the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza. And so after 8 hours of this torture, they tell this elderly man and his wife to go to this humanitarian zone. Well, as they're going to this humanitarian zone, these other Israeli soldiers spot them and they mow them down. Just shoot these elderly people to death. This old man and his wife shot them to death, just like that. This is an obvious war crime. And now you're going to say, well, Ted, this is not something that was ordered by a battalion commander. This is not institutionalized, but it is. There is an Israeli magazine called Plus 972, and they did an article about this war crime, and they quote a soldier from the Nahal Brigade. Now, the reason why we know about these war crimes is because you have soldiers who report on these war crimes. And this is what this soldier told Plus 972. The use of Palestinians as human shields is called the mosquito procedure. And this soldier says the mosquito procedure is fully institutionalized, and it's a very gray area within the army, a Nahal Brigade soldier said, explaining that the army tries to cover it up by shifting blame to junior soldiers. It's something that comes down as an explicit order from the battalion commander level and below. So a battalion commander is a very serious position within the IDF. You have to be a soldier for a very long time. I want to say at least 15 years. And once you become a battalion commander, you are commanding hundreds of soldiers in the IDF. So it is a very serious position to be in. But somewhere at the brigade commander level, they completely deny it. When problems start, they push the responsibility downward and say not to do it. So when this sort of thing happens, when this sort of thing takes place, the battalion commander will say, no, that this was done by some lower level soldiers, has nothing to do with me. The command to do these sorts of war crimes come from the battalion commander level. And the article goes on to say, even when the outcome of investigations are published, there is no chance the IDF will admit that this is an official order, a soldier explained. But if you ask any combat soldier who fought in Gaza, there's not a single one who will tell you this doesn't happen. There's no battalion, at least in the regular army, that can honestly say it hasn't used this practice. So this is an institutionalized war crime. And the Israelis who do these sorts of atrocities, they act like Nazis. They have an ideology that is based on superiority. They believe that because they are Jewish, that they are superior, and they believe that the Palestinians are inferior. They believe that the Palestinians are all terrorists and they're all animals.
בשביל לשרת את היהודים. כל הגויים שאתה רואה שיש בעולם, המיליארדים האלה, הם הכל רק בשביל שהיהודים יהיה להם איזה תועלת. אנחנו לא רואים את זה, אנחנו לא יודעים בדיוק.
שנייה, כן, היות ואנחנו בגלות, אז אוטומטי עדיין הם עוד לא משרתים אותנו לגמרי, רק חלקית.
כל אחד יהיה לו, כשמשיח יבוא, אז כל אחד יהיה לו אלפים עבדים, 2,800 עבדים.
בינתיים, המשיח לא כאן, אז איך הם משרתים אותנו?
הם בונים לנו רכבים,
בסדר, לא יודעים.
דירות, בניינים, הם בונים את זה, לנו, משרתים את היהודים.
And there is another example of what I'm talking about, because you have these hardline Zionists who are filled with this superiority complex, and they are filled with this utter, ugly arrogance. And they believe that because they are Jewish, that they have a right to murder Palestinians. And there is a story that recently occurred that clearly demonstrates this ideology. In Miami, Florida, some hardline Zionist saw two men in a car, and he thought that these two men were Palestinians. And he said, "Oh, look, there's two Palestinians over there. I'm gonna go murder them. I have a right to shoot them." And so he takes out a gun and he opens fire on these two men. The police arrest him, and he's smiling. He's smiling. And he tells the police, he recounts to the police, "I saw two Palestinians, I opened fire on them, and I killed them." And he felt so proud of himself. Well, it turned out that the two men were not killed. They were shot. They were injured, but thankfully they did not die. And they weren't Palestinian. Nope. They were not Palestinian. They were Israeli Jewish tourists visiting Florida, and they were shot by a fellow Jewish Zionist. One of the men who got shot immediately took to social media and he wrote, "I was attacked by an anti-Semite, death to all Arabs." So he gets shot, he survives, and instead of saying, "I'm so thankful that I survived, I would not want this to happen to anyone else, I don't want to see innocent people being killed," no. His response is, "Death to all Arabs." This story is really a microcosm of the problem that lies within Israel, that lies within the Zionist movement. And that is an ideology of superiority that lingers within Israel, a spirit that says that non-Jews are inferior, death to all Palestinians, death to all Arabs. And the shooter was so filled with hatred that he shoots his own fellow Jews. And one of the guys who got shot is so filled with hatred towards Palestinians that instead of saying, "Oh my God, I would not want this to happen to any other human being, I wouldn't want this to happen to anyone, regardless of their race," his response is, "Death to all Arabs." The arrogance, the blind hatred, it's all there in the story. So, can Zionists act like Nazis? Absolutely. Are all Zionist Nazis? No. Because how do we know about the war crimes that have been done in Gaza? One of the main reasons why we know about Israeli war crimes is because you have Israeli soldiers who hate these war crimes, who hate the war crimes that were done in Gaza. They hate the ideology that is used to justify war crimes. And so they report on these stories. So are the Israelis who report on these war crimes, who expose these war crimes, are they also Nazis? Are they acting like Nazis? Obviously not. So we have to be balanced. We can agree that they are Zionists who act like Nazis. Absolutely. I just gave you two examples of this. But we can also agree that they are Zionists who are decent people. We can also agree that they are Israelis who are decent people. In the next part of your comment, you say, "I don't understand why you are so against self-determination for countries." Now, I wish people would do this. I wish when people disagree with me, that they would tell me, "I disagree with you, and here is why I disagree with you. You said this." But people don't do this normally. They just say, "You're wrong." And then what they do is they present a mischaracterization of what you say, and then they try to make that mischaracterization into what you actually said. Where in my video, Mr. Asian Man, did I say that I am against self-determination for countries? Never once in that video, and never once in my life, did I make such a broad brush blanket statement of, I am against self-determination for countries. What I said was that Elon Musk stated that Germany should have self-determination. Now, when I say things in light of a particular context. Now, what is the context? The context is you have Elon Musk supporting this repackaged Nazi party called the AfD. And in the context of him supporting this party, he is saying that Germany needs to have self-determination, meaning that Germany should be independent of American power. The other part of the context is Elon Musk speaking at an AfD rally. He said that Germany needs to have self-determination in an AfD rally. You're supporting German ultranationalism. You are supporting the revival of German ultranationalism. And you're supporting a party that wants to bring back German ultranationalism and wants to bring back German militarism. And in light of this, Elon Musk is saying Germany needs to have self-determination. So if you revive German militarism, if you revive German nationalism, and then you say, okay, Germany, you're independent, you can do what you want, what are you going to have? Right now, Germany is controlling Europe economically, but if Germany has the most powerful military in Europe, it's then going to control Europe militarily. It's going to be the ruler over Europe, not just with a powerful economy, but also with a powerful military. And so you're going to see the revival of the Reich. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying I'm against the self-determination of countries. Never said that, and I wish you could show me where I said that. Because, well, you can't, because I never said that. I'm talking about the dangers of German militarism in light of the history of German militarism. World War I, World War II. In fact, America knows what it's doing. So, because people can say, well, Ted, maybe Trump doesn't know. Maybe Musk doesn't know that this is going to lead, or this could lead to the revival of Nazism, blah, blah, blah. Trump knows the danger behind reviving German militarism. He knows. How do I know this? Because he said it. Trump said it. Back in 2023, he talked about the dangers of reviving German militarism. He was speaking in a podcast, and this was before Trump said that he was officially going to run again and all that stuff. And he did this podcast, and it's very strange because YouTube got rid of this interview for some reason, I don't know. But Trump does an interview with this podcast, and he says in this podcast that Germany wants to make their military strong again. And he says this is very, very dangerous. And he explains why he thinks it's dangerous. And he says, because of World War I and World War II. Trump says this. Play the clip.
So now we're doing something that I heard this morning. Everyone said, oh, isn't that wonderful? Germany has now agreed to rebuild their military. And they've decided that they're going to go all out and they're going to now rebuild their military. Be careful what you wish for.
Why is that?
Well, take a look over the last two world wars. Take a look over the last two world wars with Germany. There is a theory out there that Germany should not be rebuilding their military so much. And Japan is now going to rebuild their military. Just be careful what you wish for, because a lot of bad things have happened with those two countries and their military. But be careful when Germany announces that they're going to start pouring the big money into the military. And so now you have Japan and Germany rebuilding again.
So Trump knows that if you revive German militarism, you are going to bring back the very evils, the very destructive force that the world saw in World War I and World War II. So Trump knows that it's extremely destructive to revive German militarism and nationalism. He knows this. So the question is, why in the hell is the Trump administration doing this when Trump knows about the dangers of reviving German militarism? It's very, very surreal. Very surreal. You say here, you want Palestine to be free, but want Europe to continue living in the guilt of the past. Now, when have I said that I want Palestine to be free? I've never said that we need to have a Palestinian state. When I talk about the evils of Israel, I don't sit there and say, well, there's an occupation. Well, Israel is evil because it's occupying a territory. I've never once said that. In fact, I have praised the Spanish Empire. I have said that the Spanish Empire did many great things when it colonized the New World. I've talked about how the British Empire brought good things to its colonies in the past. I've never said, oh yes, free Palestine. I've talked about Israeli war crimes. Now, if Israel occupies Gaza and doesn't do war crimes and treats people well, I have no issue with that. I really wouldn't care. If the Palestinians get their own state and they establish an Islamist state, I would say, damn, that's not good. If the Israelis rule over the Palestinian territories and treat people well, I wouldn't have a problem with it. My problem is war crimes. My problem is mistreatment of Palestinians. My problem is the murder of Palestinian civilians. That is my problem. When I talk about the evils of a country or the evils of an ideology, I get into specifics. I will say these countries are evil because they have done this, or this ideology is evil because it teaches this. It teaches this said evil idea, this said destructive idea. I get into specifics. I've never once said free Palestine. I've talked about the evil ideology that lingers within Israeli society, the ideology of ultra-nationalism, this ideology of superiority, this ideology that says that the Jew is superior to the non-Jew. That is what I have talked about, and that is what I have warned about. For example, there was a case where some Israeli officers sodomized a Palestinian prisoner, and the police came over to the camp that he was working in, or the camp that these soldiers were working in, and they said, okay, we're going to arrest the sodomizers. We're going to arrest the rapist. And what happened? A whole crowd of Israeli nationalists flooded the detention center, and they didn't go there to help the police arrest the sodomizers. They went over there to support the rapist, to support these guys who raped a Palestinian a Palestinian prisoner. That is this ideology that I'm talking about. That's the ideology that I'm speaking out against. When Hamas did crimes in Israel, I did numerous videos on October the 7th. When you see a video of an Israeli woman on her knees and she is begging for mercy, and hovering above her is this Hamas gunman, and he shoots her in cold blood, I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, this is This is the struggle of the unheard. It's the struggle of men who are tired of living under occupation. They're finally breaking free. I'm not like Norman Finkelstein, who said, glory, glory, hallelujah, when October the 7th happened. What Norman Finkelstein did was atrocious, praising October the 7th. And when I saw that video of that Israeli woman being executed, I talked about that. I said, this is a crime. This is murder. We can't support the Palestinian cause if the Palestinian cause is doing this, if the Palestinian cause supports this. So that ideology of the Palestinians is also evil and Hitlerian and supremacist. It's disgusting. So we can acknowledge that Palestinians do evil, and we can also acknowledge that Israelis do evil. And this is one of the main problems of both the pro-Palestine movement and the Zionist movement. The pro-Palestine movement will talk about Israeli war crimes, but will sit there and pretend that Palestinians do no wrong. They'll sit there and pretend that Palestinians don't do such atrocities. They'll sit there and pretend that Palestinians don't commit war crimes, but they do commit war crimes. And then you have the ultra-hardcore, hardline Zionists, and they'll sit there and wave the Israeli flag, and they'll praise Israel, and they'll sit there and act as if Israel can do no wrong. And if you bring up the fact of Israeli war crimes, they will sit there and say, oh, no, they don't do that. I don't believe you. That's a bunch of garbage. That's a lie, blah, 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 blah. Or they will make excuses for it, and they will say, well, that's war. That's what we do in war. And you see this sort of behavior exhibited by Japanese nationalists. If you bring up what the Japanese did in Nanking, how the Japanese murdered hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians, how they raped countless thousands of women in China, Japanese nationalists will sit there and say, well, that didn't happen. Or they will say, well, yeah, some of those things did happen, but it's war, therefore it's justified. It's this insidious and murderous and atrocious mentality that I am against. You want Palestine to be free, and I've already addressed that, but want Europe to continue living in the living in the guilt of the past. I want countries to remember and acknowledge the crimes that their ancestors did. I want countries to acknowledge and recognize that their people did evils in the past. What I don't want is for countries to say that the atrocities that their people did didn't happen, or that the atrocities that their people did took place, but it was justified. I don't want to see countries justifying war crimes, and I don't want countries to forget the crimes that their ancestors did. The people who sit there and say we should forget about the Holocaust are the very people who want to revive Nazism. The reason why they want people to forget about the Holocaust is because they want to repeat the Holocaust again. Now, it's not a coincidence that the people who will sit there and talk about how we should forget about the Holocaust are the very people who will praise Nazism and who will glorify Hitler and who will express sympathy to the Third Reich. Case in point, Bjorn Höcke, one of the main leaders of the AfD, he says that Germany is the only country that will build a monument of shame. And he was referring to a Holocaust memorial. He expresses his hatred against Holocaust memorials.
Und diese dämliche Bewältigungspolitik, die lähmt uns heute noch viel mehr als zu Franz Josef Strauß Zeiten. Wir brauchen nichts anderes als eine erinnerungspolitische Wende 180 Grad.
And then if you dig more into Bjorn Höcke, into his history, what you will find is that he wrote articles praising the Third Reich. What you will find is that he wrote articles for Nazi publications. So is it a coincidence that a guy who hates Holocaust memorials is also a guy who praises the Third Reich? It's not a coincidence, because the people who want you to forget about the Holocaust are the very people who want to repeat the Holocaust. It's the same thing with the Armenian genocide. You have Turkish nationalists today who want you to forget about the Armenian genocide. They want you to think that the Armenian genocide never happened. Why? Because they want to repeat it. And we literally saw this in 2020 with the Azeri war in Nagorno-Karabakh. Azeri soldiers went into Nagorno-Karabakh and they committed war crimes on Armenian civilians. They butchered Armenian civilians. They beheaded Armenian civilians. And the Azeris consider themselves Turks. They have a saying. They say that Azerbaijan and Turkey are the same nation. They are two different states, but they are the same nation. And that was Turkey's war against Armenia. Turkey did a war through its proxy Azerbaijan against Armenia. And what happened in that war? War crimes, beheadings, executions. And not too long after that happened, hundreds of Azeri soldiers went into mainland Armenia and they proceeded to kill Armenians. And they took some poor Armenian female soldier and they chopped her breasts off. And they chopped one of her fingers off and they shoved it into her mouth. I mean, it's just disgusting. And these were war crimes done by the Azeri government that is being backed by Turkey and being backed by Israel. And so the Azeris want you to think that the Armenian genocide didn't happen. The Turkish government wants you to think that the Armenian genocide didn't happen. But what did the Turkish government do in 2020? The Turkish government did a proxy war against Armenia in which Armenians were butchered. So case in point for what I'm trying to tell you, the people who want you to forget about past atrocities are the very people who want to repeat those atrocities. So you go on to say, I never see you asking the Russians to live in the guilt of their Soviet past. I've talked about the Bolsheviks. I've talked about Bolshevik atrocities. I've talked about the genocide of the kulaks. The kulaks were small landowners who were genocided by the Bolsheviks after the Bolshevik takeover of Russia. I've talked about these things. I don't sit there and pretend that they didn't happen. I don't deny them. I don't sit there and do apologetics for Soviet atrocities. In fact, I did a video some time ago in which I talked about how when the Germans were invading the Soviet Union, Stalin was asleep And there were people telling him, listen, the Germans are invading the Soviet Union, and Stalin punished people for telling him that the Germans were invading his country. And when I did that video, all these tankies came up in my comment section bashing me. I don't care if I piss off tankies or Nazis. I'll talk about Bolshevik atrocities. I'll talk about Nazi atrocities. Now, the thing is, in Russia, you have this sort of revival of Tsarism. You have people in Russia who see Putin as a czar. Now, another thing that you see in Russia is a revival of Christianity. There is a strong revival of Orthodox Christianity. And so you read about how tens of thousands of churches have been built in Russia, and you see all these Russians going to church, and they're trying to get rid of abortion. And so you see this struggle happening in Russia between the Christians and the atheists. And you have people in Russia who glorify the Soviet past, and they glorify Stalin, and they love Lenin. And that is evil. Putting up statues of Stalin and Lenin, Karl Marx, whatever. Evil, absolutely evil, and the Russians need to get rid of all of that. They need to purge themselves of all of that sickness, all of that glorification of communism and Bolshevikism and all that stuff. Get rid of it all. It's crap. And I'm happy to see that there is an Orthodox Christian revival in Russia. Now, the fact that you have so many churches in Russia, and the fact that you have so many people in Russia going to church, and the fact that you've had so many churches being built in Russia tells me that there isn't this exuberant revival of communism in Russia. What we see is this revival of Christianity and this revival of Tsarism. Now, in Germany, you have right now an ultra-nationalist party being the second most popular party in all of the country. And this is a party, as I have already shown, that's being led by Nazi sympathizers. This is a party that has in its topmost ranks Nazis, people like Björn Höcke, and the people love him. The voters of the AfD love Björn Höcke, and this is a guy who has expressed his hatred against Holocaust memorials. This is a guy who uses a Nazi slogan, everything for Germany. This is a Nazi slogan. It's a slogan that was used by the Nazis, and Björn Höcke uses it. He says, everything for Germany, everything for Germany. And he was arrested the first time after saying it, and they told him that's a Nazi slogan, don't use it again, and he used it again, which tells me that this guy is very, very intentional for his agenda. He wants to bring back Nazism. That's why he used to write articles praising the Third Reich. And so if the AfD fans in Germany were really against Nazism, they would be against Björn Höcke, but they're not. And you see the AfD wanting to bring back German militarism. The AfD is the only party that has a militarist department. It's the only party in Germany that has a militarist branch. It has an entire department consisting of military veterans or currently serving military officers, and their whole job is to come up with the AfD's militarist policy. There's no other party in Germany that has this. And the AfD is the biggest supporter for bringing back mandatory conscription in Germany. They want to bring back the draft. They want to force people into the Bundeswehr, into the German armed forces. This is the revival of German militarism. And this is why I say you have J.D. Vance going to Germany saying, oh, no, you big German mainstream parties, you need to be helping the AfD. You need to be inclusive to the AfD. This is, like I said, this is America contributing to this revival. And it's ugly, and you see it happening. And so much destruction was caused because of Nazism. Countless lives lost because of Nazism. Millions of people exterminated. And the Nazis had an agenda of exterminating entire peoples, enslaving entire populations. They wanted to exterminate all the Jews. They wanted to slaughter and genocide the Polish people and enslave the survivors. This was a demonic and diabolical regime. And if you are a Christian, and if you are sympathetic to this, you are no Christian. You are of the Antichrist. And so when you see, this is what I understand about people. People say, why don't you talk about the Soviet atrocities? For one thing, I have. But you see in Germany a revival of Nazism and a revival of German militarism. And you see the Americans supporting it. And you see people like Pete Hegseth speaking at a NATO summit recently saying, you Germans need to be spending more money on your military. You guys need to be defending Europe. And so if you say to the Germans, you guys need to be the defenders of Europe, and then on top of that, you are supporting a nationalist, militarist party, what's going to happen if you get what you want? You're going to have German ultra-nationalists and militarists running Germany. Not only that, but they're going to be the most dominating country in all of Europe. They're going to have the most dominating military in all of Europe. And to sit there and say that this is a great idea is absolutely insane. And that's an understatement. And when I see this sort of thing, I'm thinking, oh my God, if you aren't terrified by this, if you are not disturbed, you're either not paying attention or you are being blatantly naive, or you're just evil. You're either a tool or you're evil. And you're disagreeing with me because I'm shocked by this, because I'm disturbed by this. I don't understand why people aren't disturbed by this. That's also disturbing unto itself. The fact that people aren't disturbed by this dark reality. Anyway. In the last part of your comment, you say, the more you suppress the past and call it vile, the more people will build up admiration for it. I've heard this before, and I just don't really buy it, to be honest with you. Yes, the evils of Nazism have been talked about a lot and have been talked about for decades, but that doesn't excuse sympathizing with Nazism. You can read about Nazism, you can read about the crimes that were done by the Third Reich, that were done by the Nazis, and you can clearly see that Nazism is evil. People have been talking about Israeli war crimes for decades. Does that mean that we should admire Jewish supremacist ideology? No, it doesn't. Why? Because you can read about Israeli war crimes, and you can clearly see that they were evil. You can clearly see that evil was done, and that's it. So if we talked about Israeli war crimes for decades, and if we did a whole bunch of documentaries about Israeli war crimes, and if we did a whole bunch of movies about Israeli war crimes, and if we did video games where Israelis are the bad guys and you're trying to fight against Israeli war criminals, are you then going to say, well, we should stop talking about Israeli war crimes because if we keep talking about them, then people are going to start sympathizing with Zionism? Would you say that? If we talked about Soviet war crimes and Soviet atrocities for decades, and if we did a whole bunch of movies about Soviet atrocities, and if we did so many books, if we did thousands, millions of books on Soviet atrocities, if we did tons of video games in which the Soviets are the bad guys, are you going to sit there and say, well, we should stop talking about Soviet war crimes because, if we don't, then people are going to start admiring Stalin? Would you say that? Would you actually make that argument? But you're making that argument for the discourse on Nazi atrocities. Why? Why is that? That's very, very strange, I must say. Just because Nazi atrocities have been discussed a lot does not excuse sympathizing with Nazism. It's very simple. Very simple. Anyway, that is the end of my response. I've talked long enough. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.